So thank you so much, everyone who's joining this morning final individual presentation. So I'll be introducing Han Ibser from the Willamette University here in Portland. And Han and I we met because of the context of some classes that he's giving at the Willamette University around ethics, and around ethics, data, technology in general. And I asked him to share some of that knowledge with all of us, with our community. So, Hank, please jump in. And yeah, we are looking into your presentation.
Yeah.
Yes, right. Go.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, thanks a lot, Hector. I'm really honored to be here, and I just wanted to acknowledge Hector as part of the inspiration for what I'll be talking about, and also Justice Eaglesmith. They both serve on the Artificial Intelligence Advisory Council for the state of Oregon, and I saw a talk by Justice a little bit ago, and so I just want to acknowledge I'm using some of his examples today. So today I'm going to be kind of going through. Actually, I want to say, I guess, a little bit more about me. So yeah, Hector and I met through this class that I was teaching, and he was gracious enough to speak to my class on data ethics, and that's a recent interest of mine. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's a long-time interest of mine. It's a recent, more professional interest of mine to get into teaching data ethics. My background is in statistics, and in teaching statistics, I've thought for a long time about ethical implications around using data for different forms, and just broadly, statistics and data science, I think, are seen as kind of objective fields. And as I'd like to talk about today, there are many parts of the data lifecycle where ethical considerations come in decision-making. And my talk today will focus somewhat on negative parts of data ethics, how things can go wrong. And I just want to also acknowledge the speakers today that I've been very interested in hearing, and about the good things, the positive directions that we can take in making good decisions around data ethics. So here's a little quick outline, some introductory remarks, and then I'll jump into the talking about what the data lifecycle is, and give some examples of some pitfalls, and some thoughts about what we can do and what is being done in the area of data ethics. And then I'll finish with some concluding remarks and some links to various resources if you're interested in learning more. So about data ethics, and I included data a little bit parenthetically because I guess I wanted to say a little bit about just ethics in general, having to do with rules and guidelines for right and wrong behavior. Most ethical problems are not so simple. If there were a right or wrong answer, then it would be a little bit easier. But I would like to frame the ethical decision-making process as being a weighing of the benefits with the potential damage in the use of data. And as we use data for more and more things, the stakes become higher. So it is important for us all to be vigilant about minimizing harm in this area. And I thought I'd also, the right side of this slide, thinking about why we should care, just as a quick little example to sort of spark your thoughts, to think about, if you would want more surveillance where you live. So would you want video taken, police patrols? These interventions may detect more crime and in some ways may make your neighborhood safer, but there are other consequences as well. And I'll talk a little bit about the consequences in areas such as predictive policing a little bit later. But so I think it's not an easy question. Some people may have different opinions about it. Some people in your neighborhood may have different opinions about whether or not they want to have more or less surveillance in different areas. So these are the kinds of things that we might start to think about. it's not just crime that can be detected by surveillance that we care about. We might also care about white collar crime and about spending more resources on detection of that and using perhaps technological algorithmic methods to try to detect anomalies that might suggest white collar crime. So anyway, these are all, wrapped up in some ethical decisions that we may face. And thinking about the trade-offs, I think, is an important process for all of us to be engaged in. So I'll look at 3 case studies here. There's a Amazon hiring algorithm that existed briefly that I'll talk about. I'll talk a little bit about predictive policing, and I'll talk about the kind of increasing use of generative AI in various forms. So I wanted to say a little bit about the data lifecycle. And in my course, this is something I kind of focus on from the beginning, is that we, as kind of a structure for understanding different aspects of data ethics. So to think about, and I've kind of broken it down more broadly into 3 categories of acquisition, which is kind of 1 through 3, the generation, collection, and processing part. Governance kind of overlaps in the processing, storage, and management part. And then what I'm calling storytelling. So these are, storytelling, I think, is not a word that's typically used in this realm, but I like talking about it in that way because I think there is an aspect to storytelling which is more subjective than what most people think of as data analysis. So whenever you do data analysis, visualization of data, interpretation of results, you are creating a narrative around what you think the data is saying. And that's mostly my focus as an academic is on that part, and teaching the analysis part in particular. And for me, it's important that I reflect on how I teach the methodology, and to sort of be aware that people may view this as an objective process, but there are lots of decisions that are made along the way. So, my thoughts on the slide here, the acquisition part should be as transparent and unbiased as possible. The bias in particular, you want to be aware that when you collect data, your data needs to reflect accurately different aspects of the community that the data comes from. And frequently in data collection, we want to be really careful about who gets into the data set and who doesn't get into the data set, and what the potential differences might be between those people, and how that affects the rest of the data lifecycle, how we look at the data. So there's that generation, collection part, and the processing part. And there's a little bit of an overlap there, that in the processing part, often you want to anonymize the data, so you can't, figure out who that data is about. And that's an important part of, privacy and having agency for the people that are having their data collected, and assurance that it's not going to be used in a way that's harmful to them. So kind of talking through the governance part, there's also the security of the data. And I just want to appreciate the people that have been talking today about open data. Like, I think it is really useful and valuable, and there is a lot of good that can come of having greater use of data. And that's definitely, my field. I want to have all the data. But at the same time, it's important that the data be securely managed, and that people don't have information about them released generally that they don't want to have released about them. So this last part, I just want to say a little bit more about the storytelling aspect. Should be honest, curious. And there's this quote that I like, that most people use statistics like a drunk man uses a lamppost, more for support than illumination. And I think that that's very common, that people make a decision about what the conclusion is before they really honestly look at the data. And I think that's, important part of responsible data analysis is to approach the data with an open mind and let the data tell its own story without forcing your own narrative onto the data. Okay, thanks. So that's a bit about that. And I want to kind of zip through a few examples of how things have gone wrong. So Amazon had this hiring algorithm that they used briefly to evaluate resumes. And they used the current employees as a database to train the algorithm. And so that algorithm sought to find resumes and candidates that were similar to the existing employees. So you can sort of maybe see what's wrong with that. And this is sort of ties into the acquisition part, that however you create the data set that's being used, maybe the algorithmic part, the data analysis part is objective, but if it's starting with data that contains certain biases, then that's problematic. So in this particular case, they didn't explicitly use gender in their in the scoring of the resumes, but because there were not very many women hired from women's colleges or that had played women's sports, those were attributes that were downgraded in the resumes. And this was especially true for the higher level job titles and the technical job titles where there weren't very many female employees. So it's important to be aware of these problems. This is mostly a data quality issue. And this is a little bit of a theme through the examples I'm discussing, that the tendency will be to perpetuate whatever biases might exist in the current data. So in thinking about what data we're using, we have to be really careful about these kinds of issues around bias. So yeah. So predictive policing is another example I wanted to talk about a little bit. This is an area where not only do you get the problem of data quality, but you get kind of a feedback that happens. So if you use predictive policing to try to send the police to areas where it seems like, you believe that more crimes are being committed, it sort of seems like a good idea in terms of efficiency and keeping neighborhoods safe and whatnot. But the problem is that where you send more police, you will find more crime. Okay, regardless, even if crime is uniformly spread across all areas, if you have more police, you will find more crimes, and then you will think more crimes are committed in those neighborhoods, and then you'll send more police there because you think that's where the crimes are. And so you get this feedback, and once it starts, it results in over policing of certain neighborhoods, and you can't. It's very hard to then fix the process and to have the policing done in a way that's more equitable across different groups. There's this other part of that, which is that parole decisions are often made, at least a first pass at making parole decisions is made by using algorithms. And part of what those algorithms try to estimate is how likely is this person to commit more crimes in the future. And that may be different based on where that person came from. And so you may be, your parole decision may be based somewhat on aspects that have nothing to do with you or the crime that you committed. It has more to do with where you're from. And so once you have this system, then it is, again, it has this sort of feedback that you then don't release the people, and you don't realize that there's any issue with that, and sort of maybe obviously affects different groups differently based on race and income and different social attributes. So it's important that we, some of these things may be a little bit subtle and you don't know going in. You sort of maybe start out with a good intention, but a lot of these things can be highly problematic once you use data in these ways that you then think are objective. Okay, and I encourage any of you to speak up in the chat if you want. And then yeah, I see Sandra's comment. Thank you. And last example I wanted to give was bias in generative AI and in search engines. And so generative AI, ChatGPT, Gemini is a new Google system, Bard is their old system. And Claude, if you haven't heard of Claude, Claude is a chat bot of sorts that was developed by a company called Anthropic. And I want to give them a little bit of a mini plug that the people that founded Claude were people that left OpenAI. OpenAI developed ChatGPT. They left OpenAI because they were concerned about kind of some of these ethical considerations. So they developed their own system called Claude, which tries pretty carefully to address some ethical considerations. So all of these generative AI systems, as well as search engines and news feeds, all use fairly opaque or black box algorithms that are reflective of whatever biases may be in the data that's used to train the algorithm. So, we all know that the internet is not unbiased. Some information gets into the news feeds more than others, and things that people like, are a little bit maybe controversial or kind of clickbaity may be amplified, and there may be minority viewpoints or speakers that are drowned out. And that might happen in a variety of different ways, but the bottom line is not so much exactly how it's happening, but the recognition that it is happening. So whenever you're using any of these things, you're going to get results, whether it's through ChatGPT or a search engine or whatever, that are more reflective of kind of a dominant cultural viewpoint. And it'll be a little bit difficult to find out information about things that are maybe more diverse opinions. And so it's important to recognize this and to recognize the extent that you can kind of like get around it by if you're dealing with something like generative AI, you can ask more direct, specific questions to try to get at more diverse viewpoints, but the kind of default will be kind of, again, this kind of dominant viewpoint. So anyway, I wanted to give all these examples to just illustrate kind of some of the pitfalls that can happen, and that we need to have greater transparency in the ways that we use data in order to like find these issues and try to correct them. So I also wanted to chat just a little bit about what we can do. And so I'm biased in favor of education and engagement. Did you want me to wrap up, Hector, or?
A little bit, yes.
Yeah, okay.
So we have time for questions.
Yes. Sorry. So I think it's really important to foster awareness of these issues. And if data is being used in your field, I know a lot of the people that are coming here today are using data in different ways, to think critically about the ethical issues in the data life cycle, and to hold people, institutions accountable, how you vote, do it in ways that reflect your values. And in addition to these guardrails that I mentioned here, I think it's important to have incentives and disincentives for those companies. So appreciate what you've put together here, Hector, around open data, and the people that I've really enjoyed hearing the speakers today, and some of these issues around data governance and responsible use of data. And my last slide is just a thank you and I just put all my links in one place from different, if anyone wants to look in more detail at any of the examples that I gave or any of these other things. So thank you.